first time I think I ever remember really enjoying writing a story was actually not writing at all, it was telling it. I was a school teacher, primary school, and what had happened was that we had a wonderful head teacher who made it a rule for every teacher in the school to be reading a story to their class every afternoon from 3 to 3:30. And we were all doing this, and I used to enjoy doing that because I could see the children were enjoying it. But one afternoon, I was reading them a story, a new story, first chapter, and I looked up and it was obvious they weren't enjoying it at all. They were looking out the window and picking their noses and stuff, and they really didn't like it. And I read it better with more vehemence to try and sort of wake them up a bit, but they all looked very equally bored. And anyway, it didn't work. And so at the end of the day, 3:30, I went back and I told my wife, I said, what am I going to do? I've got this book, I've just read the first chapter, they hate it. She was also a teacher, and she said, well, the thing you must not do is to go in tomorrow and continue the book if they don't like it. They're bored, and you mustn't bore children. It's one of the first rules of being a teacher. You don't bore them. So I said, well, what do I do? And she said, well, why don't you tell them a story? Why don't you tell them a story? You tell very good stories. You're a pretty good liar, she said. You're very, very good at telling lies. I believe a lot of your lies before I think about it. And so I went to the next day, having stayed up most of the night and worked on a little story in my head. And I told them at 3 o'clock, I'm not going on with that book. You didn't like it. I'm going to tell you a story I've made up. In typical year 6 response, they went, oh, sir. So I thought, shut up. I said, shut up. Listen to me. And I stood up there and I told my story. And for the first 10 minutes, it was exactly as it had been the day before. They looked at me as if they were really fed up, bored, picking their noses, looking out the window. No good at all. And then bit by bit by bit, because I think I was telling the story as if I really meant it, as if I really cared about it, they started to listen. And it was amazing, utterly amazing. After another 10 minutes, they were completely looking at me. I thought, I can do this. I can really tell a story. And I went on. They encouraged me to tell it with more, I suppose, more pizzazz, you know. And by 3:30 the bell went. It was a wonderful moment because they all went, oh, sir. That was a big moment, a really big moment in my life. I didn't really like reading. I wasn't a great reader. I think this is because I was almost over-encouraged to read by my parents, who, I mean, they meant perfectly well. It was I came from a house, really, where there were lots of books. We didn't have walls in our house. We had books. They were just everywhere. In the toilet there were books. In the kitchen there were books. There were just books everywhere. And so they were kind of a bit thrust down my throat. And I remember being given, for instance, Oliver Twist when I was about 7 or 8, and being told, this is a great book, you know, you're really, really good, you must read it, it's very good. Well, it was tiny, tiny print. I don't think I was dyslexic. I might have been, but I never liked tiny print on a page. It always frightened me. And so I didn't read it. I said what I liked. I liked comic books because I loved stories. I loved being told stories, and I loved stories in pictures. But it was the words that frightened me. And so I read a lot of comics, which I wasn't allowed to do, which is probably why I liked them. And there was a writer called Enid Blyton, who I read, I suppose, when I was about 8 or 9. And I really liked her books because the writing was quite big, because there were pictures from time to time, and because something on every page moved the story on quite fast. But even so, I never got into what I call proper reading. I still found that too difficult. And I prefer to be outside. I prefer to be climbing trees or playing football or rugby or something like that. So I never really got to it. And then when I was about 10, I think, I read a book called Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. And that was the first proper book I read, in the sense that I realized that something a bit special was going on. For me, what I do, if it helps, is I keep my ears open, I listen, I look, I feel, and when something troubles me, upsets me, or makes me laugh, whatever it is, I remember it and I note it down. And usually that's the beginning, the little seed of a story. But that has to come from something that really you care about.